Hey everybody, this is Erica, the technology nerd likes to film stuff, and before me I have two phones. This is the Galaxy S7 Edge and the Galaxy S7. Both of these are very beloved phones, and a lot of people have been talking about them. There's been a lot of hype surrounding these guys, so I kind of wanted to give these the in-depth review treatment, cover the goods, the bads, and the uglies to help you decide if one of these is for you, or more specifically, which one of these devices is for you. I must preface this video though with I actually am pretty impressed myself. I don't think I've been this impressed with the Samsung product since the Galaxy Note 2. So Samsung really indeed has done a really good job, especially with the S7 Edge. I think Samsung has improved upon the Galaxy S6 in all the ways that they really needed to. So let's go ahead and get into this, and you can tell me what you think. Alright, so before getting into the nitty-gritty of this review, I kind of want to do something new at the beginning of the review where I talk about all the things that I love about the phone and things that I hate. So this is kind of like a quick review, a streamlined review, and then we will get into the in-depth part after this. So between these phones specifically, I like the Galaxy S7 Edge because I really like the aesthetic. I really love how this display is nice and big, and I like that this has a bigger battery as well. Otherwise, between them, these both have a fantastic experience. Samsung has done the best job I think that they have done so far. I love everything from the custom theming to this display, which is gorgeous by the way. I love Samsung Pay. I've had a lot of fun with that. It works really well. I really like how quick this feels. I love the fast charging, and yes, it does charge very quickly. I love the battery life, especially on this one. The gorgeous premium in-hand feel. I really like the water resistancy or the waterproofing. I've affectionately named this Rubber Ducky because I've been able to take it in the bathtub with me. As if I don't have technology around me enough, now it has to invade my bath time as well. I love the inclusion of the SD card slot. I liked the Gear VR bundle. That was really nice. Arguably, the camera is also a really wonderful feature. I've loved the camera post-processing. I think the colors look really nice. Also, the focusing is insane on this. It's got the fastest focus I've seen, and the low light performance is greatly improved over last year. So that's a lot to love about a phone. But nothing is perfect, and there are some things that I don't like as well. So I don't like the camera post-processing, and that I can't stand how much Samsung has decided to over-sharpen the images. Some people aren't as sensitive to that as I am, but I preferred last year's. I also don't like how AMOLED displays are kind of a lottery. A lot of people have been complaining about how they don't have a uniform looking display, so the whites on their display will look a little bit pinkish in one area and more of a coolish tone in another area. Luckily, my display looks as uniform as I could possibly want it, so I am very grateful for that because I've had a lot of trouble in the past with exchanging phones to get an AMOLED display that looks nice. Also, I've noticed that my home button, unless I hit it directly center on, tends to not respond. I think that has to do with the waterproofing. I did a poll and saw that some people are having this issue as well, so it seems to be more of a batch variation problem, but not too annoying, but it definitely is there. I have not liked the price. These guys are insanely expensive as far as phones go, and if you vouch for a carrier version or a Snapdragon version altogether, good luck unlocking the bootloader. That does not look to be possible, at least not right now. So if you want to get rid of TouchWiz, you're going to have to get an unlocked Exynos version of the phone, so that's a little bit of a pain in the butt. So those are all the goods and the bads so far, as quickly as I could name them off. So let's go ahead and move into the in-depth part of the review. So now let's move on to looking around these phones, talking about the build quality and their appearance. We've also got the Galaxy S6 and the S6 Edge from last year, just for comparison. So the first thing, of course, that sticks out is the size difference. The S7 Edge is quite a bit bigger than the S7. 5.5-inch display, 5.1-inch display. And I have noted that I like the feeling of the S7 Edge in hand much better than the S7. I like especially on the back how this is just more of a gentle curve and slope, where this one is quite sloped to me, takes on the design cues from the Galaxy Note 5, and I don't really care for that all too much. Some are going to argue that the Galaxy S7 has more to hold on to by way of metal, where the Galaxy S7 Edge, you can see that it's only got a little bit of metal here, not much, and uncannily feels like you're holding an all-glass phone. But to me, it kind of feels nice, it feels organic. But with so much glass on a phone, you're going to notice how fingerprinty these things get. The black onyx especially. Yes, it's beautiful. It looks more like a stone to me in this color. Very organic. but it just leaves such a trail behind of smudge and smudge, gummy, grimy nastiness. So I can't go anywhere without a cleaning cloth unless I want to put a skin on it or put it in a case, in which case I will lose how pretty this phone is, just to escape fingerprints. So I kind of just deal with it. Otherwise, you have the option of white, which we don't have in the United States. That would have been the first choice. This is my second choice. You also have a more flashy gold, which just wasn't for me. And you have a silvery looking one as well. So of the choice I had, this is the color I prefer most. So when looking at the front, we have Gorilla Glass 4. We have a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. We have a proximity sensor, ambient light sensor. We've got our receiver. We've also got our home button and also fingerprint sensor. On the right-hand side is the power button in the same place for both of these guys. On the left-hand side, we have our volume buttons. On the top, we have a microphone, and we also have our slot for the SD card and SIM card. Sadly, there is no infrared blaster. That's something I really missed from last year. On the bottom, we have a standard headphone jack. We have a micro USB charging port. We have a microphone and also the speaker, which sounds kind of muffly tinny to me, unfortunately, due to the waterproofing, and is not as loud as last year. Then on the back, we have our 12 megapixel camera. We've got a single LED flash and the sensor to sense heart rate. Happily, over last year, at least with the Edge version, I am very impressed with the changes that Samsung has made, because last year I felt that the Edge felt really hard to hold for me. It kind of felt a little bit sharp in the hand. It wasn't a pleasure for me. So the first time that I picked up the S7 Edge, I thought, wow, Samsung has really improved upon all the things I had complaints about. This is now truly a really nice phone to hold and looks very beautiful. Now, something that is more subtle than I notice is that the glass is curved a little bit differently on the S7 Edge than on the S6 Edge. I feel it's a more gentle type of a sloping, more uniform. And in a way, I feel like we have less glare because of it on the Edge. And I don't notice color shifting as bad, at least not on mine. Although I do notice that there are variations. The S6 is a bit more thinner, boxy looking, and doesn't have that slope on the back. Although I preferred how this felt in the hand because I don't like that slope too much, but that's all down to opinion. Otherwise, you see that these two look so similar that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference unless you saw the home button and really had a chance to hold it and see that curve on the back. So now let's talk about the waterproofing of this phone, the water resistancy. This is IP68 certified, so it's dust tight and you can drop it in 1.5 meters of water for a half hour. You do not want to go down past what they recommend, 1.5 meters, because of how this is waterproofed. The device is not protected on the inside against water, just on the outside. So at some weak points, you have some rubber rings, such as here in the SIM card slot. Also here, and at the buttons. All those have a rubber ring that keeps water from getting through. Also, the device is glued tightly closed, so water can't go past the display or the back. And then at the speaker, there is a mesh that allows sound to go out, but no water to get in. So if you go past a certain depth, the water pressure is going to go past these weak points and get into the phone, and it's going to ruin the phone. The board itself does not seem to be protected. We have to thank Jerry Rig Everything channel for checking that one out. But I did do some real-world test examples, and I want to show those to you now, so check out what it can survive in a real-world capacity. Hello? I'm in the shower. Can I call you back? Seriously? No, it'll take 5 minutes. A lot of people are kind of losing their pants over this whole... No! Still works. Still works. Oh no! And the audio seems to be all right again. So that's good. That's good. Later, I'll explain. Let's unbox. on, Scum. Please get it, please.
Please don't do that again.
All right, so now let's move on to talking about battery life. In the Galaxy S7 Edge here, we have a 3,600 milliamp hour battery. That is not bad. Not bad at all. Last year, we had a 2,600 milliamp hour battery. That's 1,000 milliamp hours bigger than last year, and I'll tell you, it really does make a difference. Last year, on both of these devices, on the Galaxy S6, this is actually 2,550, 2,600, the battery life was pretty abysmal for me. Maybe it was good for some people, but I could get about 3 hours of on-screen time, and I needed to charge it twice a day at least. These days, with a 3,600 milliamp hour battery on the S7 Edge, I make it through the day, no trouble whatsoever. I can get 5 hours of on-screen time. Maybe for some people, 5 hours of on-screen time isn't a lot, but I was consistently able to get 5 hours of on-screen time, and this device lasted me all day long. For me, 5 hours is a really good amount of time. Usually with devices, I get somewhere around 4. If I used it in incredible amounts, I got somewhere around 4 hours, but that's underneath extreme circumstances. Seriously though, the battery life is very good and I've been incredibly happy. And keep in mind, this is the Snapdragon version of the phone. I've been hearing that the Exynos variations of the phone get even better battery life. So here we have the Galaxy S7, and from what I'm hearing from people, it's getting like 4 hours of on-screen time. So that's 3,000 milliamp hours versus 3,600. I could see how there could be an hour difference. It's really going to depend on your usage. I keep it usually on auto brightness or underneath halfway most of the time. I do a lot of social media. I don't play intensive games. I do use the camera a lot. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, so that kind of gives you an idea of my usage. But I am on my phone all day long. It's like a mobile office for me. So great battery life, good battery life. Both of these are an improvement over last year. But seriously, with the Edge variant, I couldn't be happier. Go with this version of the phone if you care about battery life. I do want to note that this is the T-Mobile variant of the phone, and I did get a chance to try out the T-Mobile SIM and my AT&T SIM and got the same battery life. Thankfully, I was able to get 5 hours of on-screen time, so it didn't seem that, at least in this particular phone, changing up the SIM cards for different carriers made a difference. So that's good, because I know that can make a big difference. Your signal area can make a difference. And what you do on your phone can make a difference. Brightness, just so many different things make a difference. But still, I can see that this phone is very well capable of getting 5 hours of on-screen time and lasting all day or even into the second day with no trouble at all. So now let's move on to talking about specs and performance. We do have performance gains from last year. Last year we had the Exynos 7420, and this year it's the Snapdragon 820. And the Exynos 8890. I am happy enough with the Snapdragon 820. That is what we have in the United States. You would have to send out and get an international variant, and that would be a little bit on the difficult side. Plus, you don't get the warranty like you have with a carrier version. So instead of 8 cores, we now have 4 CPU cores. We've got 2 that are clocked at 2.15 gigahertz and 2 that are 1.59 gigahertz. We have the Adreno 530 GPU, 4 gigabytes of RAM, over 3 from last year. Unfortunately, this is 32 gigabytes of internal storage. There aren't any other variations available. The first question I know that people are going to ask me is, how is it doing with RAM management? Last year, when playing around with the Edge variant or just the S6, the RAM management was terrible. I could open up 4 applications and they would start refreshing after that when trying to switch between them. Happily, I'm able to get 8, 9, 10 applications or even more, depending on what they are. And the RAM management has been just fine. So the RAM management issue is much, 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 much better. It makes all the difference in the experience for me because I can browse the web and I can keep my web page. I don't have to have YouTube refresh itself. It was just incredibly annoying. So that's not a problem anymore. At least not for the common person. So how about performance then around the phone and around the interface? Well, to me it seems primarily quite smooth, especially underneath this settings area. It looks like it's a nice 60 frames per second, although I have to say that over the entire interface, everything isn't entirely smooth. We do see some frame drops here still and there. I'm able to prove that. If you want to see that, go underneath settings, I enable developer options. I can go down to the bottom. GPU rendering profile show on screen as bars. Now you can see here that we have a line, and that each time you see this spike here, those are drop frames. And the higher it goes above this line is more drop frames than one drop frame. So it represents several drop frames. So just scrolling through here, you can see we drop a frame here or there. Underneath the app tray, you can see it drops a few frames. Underneath the settings, things are looking pretty darn smooth for the most part. You can see how it's doing in applications like Twitter, scrolling. You can see that it's got several drop frames going on. So still around the interface and scrolling in some applications, it's not entirely smooth. You can see that even apps like the Google Play Store even still struggle with dropping frames, look pretty jittery, and are not entirely smooth. Many frame drops. So this is pretty much my favorite part of the phone right here, is underneath settings, where everything looks pretty buttery smooth. Still though, the interface does feel quick and snappy, despite some of those frame drops. Applications open very, very quickly, even large applications due to the very quick storage that this device has. That is an argument against adaptable storage because you're not going to have an SD card whose storage is as fast as what this phone provides. And it's loaded. Only takes a matter of seconds. There are definitely both CPU and GPU gains from last year. Here is Geekbench 3. And here we have GFX benchmark. Here's the S6, here's the S7 Edge. You can see the respective off-screen and on-screen score differences. Here we have 15 frames per second. This is on-screen, pushing all those pixels around, where last year it was 6.1. Here we have 31 and 13 for off-screen, 28 versus 15 for on-screen, 47 versus 25 for off-screen, so 53 versus 38 for on-screen, and 90 versus 56. So a definite gain here. Now all that is good and great, but what also matters is sustained performance, or how it does in terms of throttling over time. Here is the GFX benchmark battery test, and you can see for performance how quickly the Galaxy S6 throttles. And the S7 is doing pretty good GPU-wise. You can see you do have some throttling here, but I think it's standing up much better from last year. The Galaxy S7 looks to perform somewhat similarly. And then I did another throttling test underneath 3D Mark. This is Slingshot 3.1. So I ran it over and over and over and over again. So here we have on the S7 Edge, you can see 1958, and then a half hour later it was down to 2074. So it took a half hour to throttle down this much. But if you look at the Galaxy S6 here, you can see that I was about 1042 at 2046. And then like 15 minutes later, I was dropped down to 529, so dropping about half in about 15 minutes. So it looks like this is definitely doing much better. It still throttles, as I've seen every device throttle over time, but this does have a heat pipe in it, so it tries to disperse the heat outward. And I've noticed that the Galaxy S6 got really hot when playing games, and this one, with my infrared thermometer, I could see it's like the hottest I've seen it get to be like 102, 104 up towards this area. So it feels more warm to me. I don't feel this guy overheating when playing games. Same with the Galaxy S7 as well. I see that they perform similarly. So I've been overall happy with that type of performance. Gameplay-wise, I think Real world gameplay wise, I think that things look pretty great to me. I have no complaints whatsoever. Playing with this device has been a joy. Again, even if I played with this for a half hour, like I did with this Asphalt 8 game, it only got warm to my touch. I didn't get any type of blistering temperatures. Warm would be about 100 degrees or so Fahrenheit. So very, very, very happy with the performance. Fast internal storage, fast at loading games. If we just didn't have some of those drop frames around the interface, this would make for a near perfect experience, at least in my book. Now let's move on to talking about the features of these phones, and let me say that these are the most feature-packed phones I've seen. There's so many features that I don't think that the common person would know what all these features are, much less what they do. Let's just start out with some oldies, but some goodies. So we've got this finger sensor on the back. This is the heart rate monitor, so you can use this underneath the S Health application. Variations in your heart rate can give a look at what your stress is like. And just generally, you can see what your beats per minute is. We have a fingerprint sensor at the bottom of the phone, and that does work pretty well. It's not as good as some other sensors I have seen in that it just takes a little bit longer. And it can be a little bit finicky sometimes. But overall, it's been a really good experience. Some other now oldies but goodies include the triple click of the home button, and you have a smaller screen. So this just makes the whole interface small for one-handed use, then return to full screen. I miss the controls that used to be included. You could also resize it before. It doesn't look like you can do any of that anymore. I don't know why. Return to full screen. We've still got our pop-up features available. And now underneath the menus, you can disable these. On the Galaxy S6, you weren't able to disable this. So I like that Samsung did add back some of the menus. You can go and just make this full screen, drag downward again. You can make this into a little dot that stays on your home screen. You can keep 5 open at a time. So that's a nice multitasking experience. You can also multitask by having a split screen, so YouTube, and you can pick whatever application like music. So now you've got 2 applications running at the same time. You can resize the windows. Those are oldies but goodies. Of course, you've got some of those edge features that we've had here for a while. These are not going to be found on the regular S7, so if you swipe your finger like this, if you have this feature turned on, you can get notifications, see what the status is going on a couple different things. I overall don't really use this feature, but it's nice to have it there, I suppose. You also have the night clock that can be on. We also have a new feature, the always on display feature. You can see that depending on what the theme is, some of the themes have their own little characters that you can put on the display when it's always off. So you can see that you can choose clock, calendar, or an image. So clock style, here I have the one that's included in my particular theme. Not all the themes have their own cute little style to be included with it. You can see I can just put image, and then I can just have the image that's included in this theme. Altogether, I don't really keep this feature on. It almost stresses me out a little bit whenever I see that it flashes to another part of the display so you don't get burn-in. It looks like I'm receiving a notification on the display, and in that way it disturbs me, so I feel a little bit on edge and a little bit stressed out. Plus, you can't interact with it. It just simply sits there. So I don't really care for that, honestly. So you still have your edge feeds, as I showed on the side. You can get to show up when the display is off. Edge lighting, so if you receive a call and the phone is face down, you will see it. That's the same as last time. Nothing new there. We also have edge panels, so there's more things going on with this edge panel thing. It's much more to where I actually am kind of starting to use it, but almost not really. What I do like is that you have the ability to set the transparency. You can switch where you want it to be active. Because I don't care to see this little bar showing up all the time, I like to make it go completely transparent. So I have it just set here on the side, so it's easily reachable and my fingers reach. Comes up from the side, and I've got contacts. This is people edge. I have task edge. So I've set a couple things. I can automatically text my husband or my mom. It will go right into composing a message to them, or I can just decide to compose a message and decide who it is later. You can create browser shortcuts such as this vegan chili macaroni and cheese. And now whenever I click that, it'll go right to that web page. so that's nice. And you can set a bevy of other things for Task Edge. That's pretty nice. I've got the weather. You can download other applications. This is RAM status, and I also paid for this one. This is File Manager. So you can see you have several different choices. You can choose to keep whichever one's active. It tells you what they are. Yahoo Finance, My Places, Apps Edge. These are quick tools. So there's just so much here. Currently, if you go underneath download, there's a couple of different options, ones that are both free and ones that are paid. I would like to start seeing things for Facebook, for example, or maybe even one for YouTube. And this is now open to developers, or at least Samsung said this is going to be open to developers, so I'm excited to see what can be generated here. Overall, I think that this Edge thing is starting to turn into something more than just a gimmick. But I myself haven't used it too much as of yet. It's so fast to do something so simple as to compose a message just by hitting messages. And since this phone is so quick at opening applications, I don't really find a need for extra shortcuts. But that's just my take. I can't neglect themes. This is something that I really love, is the themes. I'm finding some cutesy themes that I like to keep around. I think my favorite is this one here. Check out how adorable this is. It's called Night Sky, always on display, live. So apply. This is also a dark theme, so arguably it saves battery. I just love how the color scheme on this is. It's completely adorable and customized. Even going underneath settings. I love the starry background and the color scheme here. This is absolutely adorable. We've also got this new game launcher feature, which I guess is pretty cool if you're someone who's really into playing games on your phone. So you can decide to have no alerts when you're playing games, so you can't be disturbed. You've got power saving features, so you can change the frame rates and the resolution. You've also got game tools, so let's go ahead and start Asphalt 8. Underneath game tools here, you see that you can decide to have the no alerts. You can lock recent and back keys. You can minimize the game to being just a little dotty thing like I showed you before, if it'll do it. There we go. So now you can minimize even your game applications, which is nice. So if you needed to take a phone call, for example, or you needed to hand your phone to someone else for a second, there it goes, it resumes. This is all thanks to that 4 gigabytes of RAM. Really helps. We can take a screenshot. It's going to be saved underneath the gallery, and then you can record the screen as well. So you have some settings for that. So underneath record, you can choose an image if you want. You can change the size. You can actually also record with the front-facing camera. And you can choose to have the microphone so that you can speak and say what's happening in the game. Or you can just record game audio from the system. You can choose the resolution and also your bit rate. And as you're doing that, that is all saved underneath the gallery. So here we have Asphalt 8. It has its own little folder.
So I turned the game audio down, and it's recording my face. It's kind of easy to put my finger in the way, I'm noticing.
So that's pretty cool. I don't know if I'm ever going to use that personally, but at least you can disable that. You can turn off game tools and you don't have to be bothered by it again. I can go underneath Asphalt 8 and not see any of that interface, so that's nice. So many features on these phones. Really, you get the same features on the Galaxy S7, just minus those Edge features. Alright, so now let's move on to talking about these displays. Both of these are incredibly beautiful displays. We have a 5.5-inch display, 5.1 inches. Both of these, of course, are AMOLED. There's still diamond matrix pen tile for both of them, but at this PPI, you can't tell. So this is 577 pixels per inch and 534. There's ever so slightly a difference, but the normal person is not going to be able to tell. It's even hard for me to tell the difference between the pixel densities of both of these. So just pick whichever one works for you. One thing I notice with the Edge version of the phone is that the fingertip rejection isn't so good right now. I'm hoping for an update because sometimes when I'm holding the phone, My fingers will touch the display and it will start doing wonky things, so hopefully Samsung can fix that. I've heard some people having a problem when using the camera, for instance. If you hold down on the side of the display, some are having a hard time focusing on things or even getting the phone to actually take a picture. So please fix that, Samsung. Otherwise, I've been very happy with this Edge display. Both of these devices get very nice and bright. I measured both of them getting about 400 nits with manual brightness, but once you hit auto is where it gets even brighter. So out in sunlight, I was able to measure that it got 700 nits. Some are saying it gets even more than 700 nits. So you will not have issues out in direct sunlight whatsoever. Now, of course, since these are AMOLED displays, you also get really, really nice inky blacks, a really great contrast ratio. Now, as for the calibration of these devices, I've had my hands on many units at MWC, and I've had 3 in-house to look at as well. I can see that the calibration varies between the devices a bit. It's kind of a lottery of what you're going to get, but I can see what Samsung is trying to target with the calibration, and overall they do a really good job. Let's go to the basic mode, as that is the mode that is the most accurate for content that we're able to see mostly. Consumer content anyway. So that is the basic mode, or the sRGB mode. What I mean by consumer content is Netflix, YouTube, the Android operating system itself, and also web. All that content is meant for sRGB, or is encoded in sRGB. So when you hear people talking about how well the display is calibrated to sRGB, it's how well can that content look on this display, and will it look accurate? So that is why we care so much about looking at the basic mode. So I was able to run some measurements between the S7 Edge and also the S7. And I could see that the gamut is pretty close to matching sRGB. That is the range of colors the display is able to show, at least underneath the basic mode. The saturations look pretty good for color accuracy. They're not all over the place or adding a lot of saturation, so there's no wonky colors. Now, when looking at the gamma, it is a bit too high for sRGB at 2.4 instead of 2.2. This is typical to Samsung. I see them do this quite often. They've done this forever. It makes the image look slightly darker and more saturated than gamma 2.2. The thing that really varies between the displays that I've seen is the color temperature and the white point, or how whites look. That really is going to be the biggest lottery. I see that Samsung is trying to target D65 whites, or 6,500 Kelvin for white, and also having red, green, and blue balanced. So ideally this should look like daylight whites on a cloudy day. Imagine what that type of white looks like, and that's what D65 is supposed to be. Some devices that I have seen are a little bit on the greenish side. The whites look like they've got too much green in them, have a weird color cast to them. Generally, though, I've seen them looking better than last year. My Galaxy S6 looked pretty greenish, for example, and mine here are looking pretty close to that daylight neutral. The biggest thing I hear people complain about is that their device doesn't have a uniform display, or the whites or the grays end up having two tones to them. Thankfully, this display here doesn't have a two-toned type of display. It looks nice and white, uniform throughout. Where some displays will have more of a warm tone at the top, more of a coolish, greenish tone at the bottom. So it is possible to get a nice looking display. It really is. It's just really going to be a lottery. That seems to be typical for AMOLED displays. So that is the basic mode. That's going to be the most important mode. That is if you want to represent the content that we have well. My favorite mode, though, is the AMOLED photo mode, and it keeps the same white point, so it keeps the same D65 looking whites. It does extend the greens, though, so you get more saturation in the greens, the cyans, the yellows. Maybe you can see the difference here. So it adds a little bit of punchiness to the display, but it doesn't overdo it. And then you have the AMOLED Cinema mode, which is going to make the colors go to hell, pretty much. A lot of people like this mode, though, because it really oversaturates the colors. It also gives an artificial contrast effect where it really makes the shadows look a lot deeper. And also the AMOLED Cinema mode lends a much cooler white point as well, and that is on purpose. So for people who really like to have an effect with the display, they tend to like the AMOLED Cinema, but it tends to make my eyes bleed a little bit. So I'm good with either of these two. Also, there's adaptive display. They say optimize the color range, saturation, and sharpness of your display automatically. This mode may not be compatible with third-party apps. This is the one that is enabled by default. It still looks quite saturated to me, but I don't think that many people are going to be straying away from that mode. It looks all right. I've also been quite appreciative of this slider for the auto brightness. You can adjust the auto brightness to what you fancy. So both of these devices have really great displays, some of the best displays you're going to be able to get on the market. And so far I've been quite happy as well. So how about telephony then? Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, all of that good stuff. I haven't had any issues whatsoever using this as a phone, as this is a phone. Calls have come through just fine for me and on both ends. I haven't had any issues with my Wi-Fi or my Bluetooth. GPS has been pretty nice and spot on to me, so really no complaints whatsoever. It's hard to talk about reception because it's going to depend on what country you're in, which phone version you have, what carrier you're on, your reception area. But for me, it's been just fine. I haven't had anything to complain about trying this across both AT&T and T-Mobile on this same phone. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the camera. And of course, you have the excellent way of executing the camera even from when the phone is off. Double tap, and within not even a second, it starts up for you. The interface is really nice and clean. I like how it's laid out. You have some options here on the side. You can decide to hide them if you'd like to. So you have your effects tab, you have HDR auto. You can also turn it on or off. I prefer to keep it on because it works really well. You have your timer, you have your flash, on and off, auto, your option for your resolution. So you have a 4:3 aspect of the sensor. That's unfortunate. 12 megapixels and downward, so on and so forth. Your 16:9 crop is going to be 9.1 megapixels. Then from there you can get into the camera settings. There's all kinds of settings here. For video size, you have UHD, QHD, Full HD 60 frames per second, 1080p, 1:1 HD, and VGA. You've got motion photo, which is kind of like Apple's live photo. Tracking autofocus, you can track an object. You can choose to have grid lines on for composition, location tags, shooting methods, so voice control. You've got your quick launch. You can choose to save images as a RAW file, save to SD card. You have your volume buttons function, so take pictures. You can also use it to zoom and to start video. Very streamlined and simple. Then you have mode. You can switch to the front-facing camera, take a picture, and here's your shutter button, and here is to start video. So underneath mode, auto, pro, selective focus, panorama, video collage, live broadcast, all the things that we've seen before, and some other things that I really wouldn't use, such as food, which seems to really just blur everything around the food and make it pop more. Pro mode is where it's at if you want to have some extra control. So you have some options for the focus, center, or multi. You have your metering mode, center weighted, matrix, and spot. You've got your timer, flash, and also your aspect and resolution of your pictures. Then here you have your filters. There's a couple different modes, or you can make a custom one if you'd like. Here's your control for your focus, for your white balance, ISO, and also shutter speed. Thankfully, they have that underneath here, like the Galaxy Note 5. On my Galaxy S6, I still don't have the option to mess around with the shutter speed. So that is there, and then we have exposure compensation. Then underneath the front-facing camera, hello, you have a couple of modes. Selfie, wide selfie, video collage, live broadcast, virtual shot. You've also got these crazy beauty modes here. Cover myself up so you can see. So you can play around with your skin tone. You can change where the light is hitting your face. You can slim your face. You can make your eyes larger. There's shape correction as well. That's getting kind of crazy. This is what I usually see on Chinese phones. This isn't something I would use, but I guess it's nice to have the option. And of course here you can choose your resolution, flash, your timer, auto, HDR, which I always keep on, and effects. Very, very high functioning camera, a lot of features here. Still, none of these features matter if you don't have good photo quality and video quality as well. So I want to talk about the video quality and the photo quality. So for the purpose of this review, I kept the mode on auto, and I also kept HDR on auto as well. I decided to do this as most people would keep it on these modes anyway, and the best part of having a camera in your pocket is the magic of being able to point and shoot without having to do much but, well, point and shoot. I am bummed that the aspect of the sensor is 4:3. 69 will be a crop and you will lose resolution from 12 to 9.1 megapixels. I'm also bummed that the sensor is lower resolution than last year, but Samsung made that compromise to help with low light. The camera is incredibly fast to focus though and take pictures, so action shots should not be a problem. I was able to catch plants in motion, and every single one was in focus over the Galaxy S6, which had a hard time keeping up taking that many pictures in a row. Dynamic range looks fantastic. I was happy to see that the camera could really bring out the skies. Colors are wonderful. They're a tad bit oversaturated, but the effect still looks nice. There's also more contrast to these photos than what I could see from last year. I did notice that the camera tends to overexpose some images, so I would end up using the exposure compensation to knock down the exposure just a tad, and that tends to fix the problem. When taking pictures up close, the depth of field is very, very shallow with that f1.7 lens. I often find the depth of field to be a bit too shallow for my taste for macro shots because the plane of focus is so narrow. I often found that I tried to focus on a point and the camera ended up focusing on something else right next to it, and then the entire photo would be spoiled because I could no longer tell what the image was supposed to be a picture of. So on the plus side, you get nice and shallow depth of field, but then very little is in focus. So if the camera lies to you and tells you something's in focus, it might not be, and it spoils the picture. Now, some things that really bothered me. Unfortunately, Samsung's post-processing is quite aggressive. They use a noise reduction filter that ends up over-smoothing an image to where there isn't any detail left. And also, they over-sharpen the images way too much as well. Last year, it wasn't so aggressive. If you don't want to deal with Samsung's post-processing, though, you can shoot in RAW. That is an option. Also, if you use the manual mode, you'll have some extra control over the camera, though you're still dealing with Samsung's overall processing. I am quite happy with the low light improvements from last year. I can definitely tell a difference. Also, without needing another app or upgrade, the camera has a shutter speed control, like I mentioned before, so you can put the camera on a tripod for longer exposures. That's really very nice and useful. The front-facing camera is 5 megapixels. It has really nice colors as well, and I also left it on the auto HDR mode all the time. John and I had a lot of fun with that front-facing camera, and I think it's going to suffice for most people. It has a nice bit of detail as well. Video also looks great. The very shallow depth of field does help here when focusing on a close object. Focusing in video is very fast, so the camera can deal with quite dynamic scenes without losing focus. "4K has a lot of nice detail, and it's nice that optical image stabilization works in 4K. The only one that won't work in 4K is the software stabilization." This is me to the camera while walking, filming Ultra HD. And Jonathan! Getting some bread.
I used to bake these.
Used to bake those? What are they? Special loaves?
These are sweet yeast rolls.
Ooh, I want to make our own yeast roll. So I wonder if this uses optical image stabilization underneath 4K. I keep forgetting if it does or not. Clock in. Here is a 1080p 60 frames per second with the electronic video stabilization enabled. So you can see what this looks like. Turn around and do it back. So you can see. Picking a different aisle. Now stabilization off. 60 frames per second, 1080p. I think this looks much better without the stabilization. Turning around. And doing it again. Maybe I'm wrong, but the focus also seems to look a little bit better without the stabilization on. I don't know. Hi, Jonathan. What are you doing? It's a video.
I always smile for pictures and say stuff for... I always smile for videos and say stuff for pictures.
Poor Jonathan.
We said it's 7, so it's great.
That's a big spill. How do you feel?
All over the table, under the table, over here, and on the chairs. Always cleaning up after Erica's messes.
What? Overall, I've been very happy with this camera, except for Samsung's kind of crazy post-processing, and I also wish that the aspect of the sensor was 16:9 at 12 megapixels. But I think for most, the compromises that Samsung has made here are going to work really well in all kinds of different environments, so I really can't complain that much. I can go get myself a DSLR if I want to complain that much. So thank you everybody for watching. This has been Erica, the technology nerd, likes to film stuff. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think about these phones. Which one would you go for? Would you go for the Edge variant, or would you go... Whoops, that was the S6. Which of these would you go for? Would you go for the Edge variant, or would you go for the S7? Let me know what you guys think overall. Ask any other questions in the comment section below. I usually stick around for an hour or so once a video is released, and I like to answer questions. Ew, grime. Very, very grimy phones. All I've done is hold these for a while, and they look like this. I'm going to be having the LG G5 in hand very soon. Of course, I wanted to compare those phones in some capacity. So again, let me know what you think, and have a good night.